not only Gothard himself in this system, what I observed kind of coming into it, but it puts the husband or the father in an inordinate place of power where they become the Holy Spirit
Mhm.
in the lives of their family.
Yes.
So you are actually not living your life before God, you're living your life before the patriarch to please him, to honor him, to make him happy.
Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Friday, March 24th, 2023, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's good to be back, and really, I'm so glad that I'm here. And I was over on Ginger's Instagram, and I noticed that she was promoting a podcast that she did with the man that wrote the book on Bill Gothard. So Don Veinot and Ron Henzel, who are part of a Midwest Christian outreach group. So the Midwest Christian Outreach, and that's the channel that this was on. The book they wrote back in 2003 called A Matter of Basic Principles is a deep dive into all things Bill Gothard. Now, this doesn't go into account any of the things that came out in 2014 against him, the Recovering Grace stuff, but it does go into the history of a lot of different things that have gone on in the world of Gothard, and it goes through in sort of a Christian format all the different reasons and why this organization is really not biblical. And it sort of dives into like what happens when someone leaves, why was this designed the way it was, you know, all their different conversations with Gothard trying to convince him that he was wrong. And it was about a year and a half ago, that a friend of the Duggars actually reached out to me and they were like, Katie, if you really want to understand more about Gothard, you need to reach out to Don. And so I did, and Don sent me this book. And I had a conversation with him on the phone, and I've exchanged numerous emails with him. And I will tell you, he was fundamentally, like, he was critical in helping me understand who Bill Gothard was as a person, the decisions that Bill Gothard made, helping me understand really the very nitty gritty of how this organization came to be, the control that Bill Gothard had over his people, why he designed the organization the way that it was, and what happens when people try to leave. It was during that time that Don had let me know that he was actually in talks with someone from the Duggar family, though he did not tell me who. And now I've learned that it was Jeremy that actually reached out to Don several years ago for help with this situation. Don also told me in email today that he was a key part of providing analysis to Jinger as she wrote her book, Becoming Free Indeed. So Jinger went to the expert on Gothard to write her book on Gothard, and she did an interview with Don, and it was posted a few days ago. So I'm going to put a link for this interview below, but I just wanted to put this out there. And there was some key differences in the interview that Jinger did with Don compared to other people, because Don knows Gothard. Don knows so much about Gothard, he wrote the book. And one of the parts where in some of the interviews with Jinger, you get this understanding that like she's just repeating a script. But in this conversation, you could tell that she wasn't repeating a script, because Don was asking very pointed questions about some of the structures of Gothard, how it was implemented in her home, and some of the things that affected her marriage and what her thoughts were growing up. And one of the biggest conversation pieces of this was the idea of and the structure of authority. Now, it's interesting that she would have this conversation with Don, because back in around 2004, 2005, a bunch of Jim Bob's friends gave him this book. And when they gave him this book, I was told that Jim Bob threw it away and he called it trash, and he didn't want to know about Bill Gothard. He is devoted, he didn't care, he didn't want to know. So for Jinger to go to Don, it's a very big defiance of her dad, because it proves that she is seeking information from someone that he deems as dangerous, okay? So during the interview, they talked about the umbrella of authority, which we've talked about a lot on this channel. And they were discussing about, as you saw in the very beginning of this video, this whole idea about once a couple marries, they're supposed to leave and cleave and become them like their own union. But Gothard had designed this belief system that once a child gets married, the parents still are counsel to the kids. And because they're counsel and they're still considered above them, they're supposed to just take the counsel. What Jinger says is that this created a problem in her marriage, because what if the counsel they receive is conflicting because there's no answer, and then the demand that you have to take the counsel or else you're defying mom and dad. So you're in a marriage and dad still thinks that he has control over you, and when he's counseling you, if you don't do what he says, you're disobeying him, which means you're coming out of the umbrella of authority and you're going to be attacked, and you're under Satan's going to attack you, and bad things and harm is going to come to you, okay? They even have this like funny little part in the video where they actually explain what the umbrella of authority is, which I thought was amazing.
About their children's success. Have the youth in your church been asking too many questions lately? Do they listen to the kind of music that leads to potential sins like foot tapping? Do they look puzzled when you try to explain the evils of Cabbage Patch dolls? Are you looking for a new approach to these persistent life problems? Well, then you need Bill Gothard's umbrella of authority. It prevents accidental violations of out-of-context biblical principles and provides non-optional protection from music with a beat, skirts above the knees, beards on men, and it provides guaranteed protection from destruction thanks to our patented spiritual Scotch Guard, and it comes in a size for every level of God's chain of command. Remember, rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and witches ride brooms, not umbrellas. And now the Bill Gothard's umbrella protection is actually on clearance, so that all it costs this week is your Christian freedom.
And there was another part where Jeremy actually spoke about who gets attracted to these kinds of systems. So the patriarch under his system is able to have full control of the family. So what it attracts are men who want to become like gods. And because they have no one that they have to submit to because they're the patriarch, they have their family effectively worshiping them.
And so Gothard is promoting, which I think for a lot of the people, we talk about certain people in this teaching, you see a lot of people who really love Jesus and just want to follow him get sucked into teaching like this. But it also attracts those narcissistic leaders who want to be God. And so they see Gothard's teaching and go, this gives me absolute control. And that control, though it is claimed leave and cleave, practically works itself out in the father trying to control into marriage. And so it becomes this inordinate place of authority. So the issue of authority is very much, well, yeah, we honor our father and mother, but is honor absolute submission and obedience forever? Well, clearly not in scripture, but in Gothard's worldview, it was.
So because of the structure of this system by Gothard, basically what Jeremy is saying is that there are some people that are attracted to the system that truly love Jesus and they're just doing what they think is the right thing. But then there's also a subset of men that are attracted to this system because it gives them full control. And because of the umbrella of authority, they are at the top with no accountability. And because the Duggars were never parts of churches, because the churches always did something, they would cause church split, or the churches would play beats with a drum or whatever Jim Bob didn't agree with. And Jim Bob became the god of his house, and his family is revering him as a god. He has full supreme authority over them, and he uses that to control his family, right? And he's saying that in marriage, how that exhibits itself is that the father then thinks that he can control the marriage and what the people in marriage are doing, okay? So if you think of it in this context, and I know the source is Jeremy, so I think Jeremy has his own issues with narcissism. And I don't know that Jeremy, I mean, when we talk about Jim Bob, I don't think Jeremy is as bad as Jim Bob. But I do think that he's hit the nail on the head, that Jim Bob was attracted to these teachings, and Jim Bob wants people to think that he's a god, and he wants his family to worship him. And he has become the vehicle of his being the vehicle to God for his family. And so he believes that it's his decisions and his decisions are it, and nobody can tell him otherwise. And now you understand why you're in a situation where you've got kids that live on the compound of the Duggars' house because he's made them believe that they can't leave. One of the Duggar friends tried to defend this and said, you know, the kids can do whatever they want. They don't have to ask Jim Bob questions. They can just go do things. And I wanted to say to them, of course, but they've been indoctrinated to know that if they step out of line, there's consequences. They've been indoctrinated to obey their father, so they're not going to make decisions, most of them, that will willingly defy him, or else they're going to get his wrath. And that's why you still see the adult children on his property. So no, sure, Jana can leave the house when she wants to leave, but she's not going to move out because she doesn't feel like she can. And Jinger even spoke about that, about how women are not allowed to move out and have a job before they're married, and their job is literally to serve their families. Jinger actually expanded further on this, and she described how she had to confess every single thing, every sin to her dad, everything, so that she could get right with God.
And I think along that line, it's interesting because I remember several times, like even as a kid, like within the home or whatever, and then outside, I almost looked at it as like a priest. Like you have to come to this person, get their counsel, do this stuff, or confess your sin. All these details of like steps to gain a clear conscience. Some of those things are like decent, but then once you get into it, it's like you feel like you have to have a mediator. You have to have someone between you and God. So that's either the parents or it's going to be this other individual. Have a right relationship with God, or you can't have the Jesus be our mediator.
Basically what she's saying is that in order for her to be able to confess to her sins, it would be equivalent to like a Catholic going to a priest. Now, they did note that a lot of his teachings, Gothard's teachings, are actually specifically around like authority, and some of his definitions come from the catechisms of Catholicism, which is why I think as a former Catholic, I see a lot of Catholicism in these teachings, because I'm like, oh, that was what I was taught when I was growing up. But they've said that they've actually looked at catechisms, taken definitions from Gothard, looked at the catechism, and like this literally comes from the catechisms. And so she's saying like, I have to almost go to a priest who is my dad and confess every single sin. And then it's up to my dad to decide whether or not I'm going to be absolved of those sins, and if I can have a good standing with God. Think of the amount of power that gives to a father, that he gets every detail about his children's lives. So everything that they think about, they get to tell their dad. And then think about how in the hands of a wrong, powerful, narcissistic, controlling megalomaniac like Jim Bob Duggar, how that information could be used against them. Like they could be blackmailed with that information. That information could be used to hurt them or to be slandered against them if they were to leave. So they're telling their parents very intimate details about themselves. And then they know that if they leave, their dad could tell everyone about that and be like, well, that's just because she dealt with this issue. Kind of like how Jim Bob would tell his friends that Michelle just struggled with self-pleasuring herself as a teen, and that's why Josh was the way he was. Jim Bob can use that information to then humiliate his family members if he needs to, and get them to submit to him even further. And Jinger says she feels like she has to confess everything. So it's created a man in Jim Bob that he feels like he is a god. So if you're thinking that Ginger's book is not about her father, it's not about her family, it is. Because Jim Bob is the quintessential narcissist that saw in this system the ability to control a family. this gets me to this full interview. I would love you to watch it. I'll click the link below. There's other stuff in this interview that I thought was pretty compelling, but those were sort of just the key components about Jim Bob that I thought would intrigue you. And I do think it's calling Jim Bob out and saying, you know, he treated us as though we need to worship him. They might not have said his name, but they were talking about him. Because Jeremy says, this is how it affected my marriage, okay? So they're kind of blasting Gothard, they're blasting Jim Bob, he's being called a narcissist. So that gets me to this next part about Josh, the other narcissist in the family. Okay, so Josh Duggar was actually released from the SHU yesterday. I was told that he returned to building 6, where he has his bunk. He is back to sleeping in his bunk. And he got out a few days early because of overcrowding. So apparently the SHU, which is the special housing unit, which is used as a place to discipline individuals that are in need of discipline for breaking rules in the prison, or for individuals that need protective housing. I've been told that the SHU is absolutely disgusting. It's really nasty. They don't have the best heating or AC. They sometimes can't even have a bed in there. It's gross, and they only get a couple showers a week. So he's back, and he has allegedly told people that he will never go back there again, that it was such a nasty experience, and that he is just glad to be out of there. I have a feeling that Josh will be back in there at some point. Josh always says he's never going to do something again, and then he does it again, and he can't stay out of trouble. Will he try to be smarter and not get caught? Sure. I was also told that Josh has the bandwidth and the ability to pay back the person whose phone got confiscated. So apparently Josh is telling everyone he's going to pay back the guy whose phone he used. And he's out of the SHU. And so he's out of the SHU because they have only so many beds and cells that they can use, and it's overcrowded. And so they've got new people that need to go into the SHU, so they release prisoners every Tuesday and Thursday. And he got out yesterday, and so he spent just under 75 total days. And now that he's out, Anna is barred from seeing him for 6 months. She's barred from calling him on the prison phones for 6 months. And he is barred from commissary for 6 months. So some people in my comments were like, maybe this will be a good opportunity for Anna to get disconnected from him. I still think they'll find a way to communicate. He can still get letters. And I still think that Josh is going to use a phone. There are so many phones in this facility that I find it hard to believe that he wouldn't try it again. Very hard to believe. And even though he's going to be on restrictions, I still don't think that he will stop. That's just my opinion. So Josh is out of the SHU, spends just under 75 days, I think around 70, and he's never going back again. And he didn't get special treatment by getting released early. So Josh is back, and he can start getting in trouble again. So if any of you want to place a bet on when the next time Josh gets placed in the SHU, you can put that in the comments below. And what do you think about Jeremy and Jinger basically calling Jim Bob a narcissistic man with a God complex? Tell me in the comments below. Bye, guys.